I'm Director of the Decolonizing Arts Institute and Director of the 2020 project. And the aim of this session today is to introduce ourselves and some of our partners, to share, as the name suggests on the tin, some information about the 2020 project, and to understand from you, the artists thinking about applying, what some of your questions might be at this stage. So before we begin, allow me to share some housekeeping reminders. Please do keep your mics and cameras off unless you are asking a question. And if you could keep your questions until the end segment, there will be time for Q&A. If you require transcription, please accept the live transcript option, which you should see across the top of your window. If you have any questions or comments, do post these to the chat. And please note the event is being recorded for those unable to attend. We will stop recording before the Q&A and make the recording available after the session, along with updated FAQs to the call document. Hopefully that's all clear. To give you an overview of today's session, we will shortly introduce the 2020 team, and I will provide a bit of background to the Decolonizing Arts Institute and the 2020 project. I'll then hand over to my colleagues who will give you some more detail on 2020, and we will then move to brief presentations from the 8 partners that we are working with in Cohort 1 of 2020. You can find a full list of our 20 partners on the Institute's 2020 project page, and today you'll be meeting and hearing about Compton Verney in Warwickshire, the Harris Museum and Art Gallery in Preston, the Hepworth Wakefield, Kelvingrove Art Museum and Gallery in Glasgow, and more generally about Glasgow museums, the Lightbox in Surrey, Endaka, the National Disability Arts Collection and Archive at the University of Buckinghamshire, Pallant House in Chichester, and Sheffield Museums Trust. We'll then take a short 5 minutes break for you to digest a little, and then we'll come back to run through next steps in the application and selection process. We should have 15 minutes or so towards the end for some Q&A. So do post questions if you have them, as I say, in the chat during the presentations, but we'll come to the Q&A at the very end. At this point, can I invite Martin and Maya to briefly introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Martin Rouleau. I'm the project producer for the 2020 project. I come to you with a lot of enthusiasm and a background across project management and curatorial projects in visual arts at Tate, the ICA, and Electra Productions, various other places in and out of London and in and out of the UK, and some teaching, lecturing, research at Goldsmiths, Birkbeck and UCL. The project is also supported by the fantastic Maya. Maya, if you can take over.
Yeah, sure. I'm Maya. I'm the 2020 project assistant. It's really great to see so many people enthusiastic about the project. And yeah, I've kind of come from a background working in cultural and research collaborations, and also from theatre. So that's me.
Thank you, Martin and Maya. I should say the 2020 team is also supported by an internal working group from across UAL's central services and an external advisory group to bring sector expertise to the project. Again, you can find out more about the project in general and specifically about our advisory group members in the Call for Artists document. So I'm now going to just share a few words about the Decolonizing Arts Institute by way of some context for the 2020 project. The Institute was conceived in late 2018 as a decentered, porous and evolving space for building on and developing the work of previous initiatives led by UAL, including the AHRC Black Artists and Modernism project, which was led by Professor Sonia Boyce. The Institute seeks to challenge colonial histories and imperial legacies and to drive cultural, social and institutional change through practice and research in multiple forms: artistic, art historical, curatorial, museological and pedagogic. From 2019 onwards, we launched several pilot activities, from research residencies to seminars and workshops, roundtables and conversations. And you can catch up with various recordings and podcasts on our YouTube and SoundCloud channels. You can also download several e-publications from our Institute pages. The Institute's current work includes a major 3-year project called Transforming Collections, Reimagining Art, Nation and Heritage. Transforming Collections is funded by the AHRC Arts and Humanities Research Council as part of Towards a National Collection, which is a 5-year programme seeking to harness the potential of new technologies to dissolve barriers between collections. We're working closely with colleagues in the UAL Creative Computing Institute on this project and Tate as our main project partner. So 2020 will be unfolding in parallel to Transforming Collections. 2020 is an ambitious 3-year national commissioning and network project conceived and designed to catalyse artists' careers and change in collections. We are generously supported by funding from Arts Council England, the Freelands Foundation and UAL. 2020 is a response to urgent calls for actions to follow statements made across the arts in the wake of Black Lives Matter. Actions to address the social inequities and racial injustices amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. The project will enable 20 ethnically diverse artists to take up residencies with 20 public art collections across the country. These will lead to the collection's permanent acquisition of a new work by their artist in residence, as well as a series of commissioned texts and a public programme bringing artists, curators and writers into conversation. We acknowledge that some artists may choose to identify as a person of colour or not, and or prefer other terms in relation to different diasporas, diverse cultures and heritages. We also acknowledge that the term artists of colour fails to make explicit the complexity of lived experiences of discrimination, for example, where racism intersects with gender, sexuality, heteronormativity, classism or ableism. 2020 aims to catalyse the careers of self-defined emerging or mid-career artists who may currently have little or no collection representation at all. With the production of a 2020 print portfolio to be gifted to all our collection partners, by the end of the programme, every artist will be in 20 collections. 2020 sets out to build stronger relationships between artists, museums, galleries and audiences. We will work with each collection partner to support artists' development and well-being through peer and institutional networks and encourage mutual critical exchange. Ultimately, 2020 aims to support inclusive engagement between artists, collections, and the communities they serve, to address the often problematic and negative ways in which diverse audiences see themselves reflected in museums and galleries, to generate richer understanding of collections' histories and the contributions of underrepresented or overlooked artists in their midst, and to urge critical reflection and actual change in practices. What do collections collect? Why, how, and for whom? I'm now going to hand over to Martine and Maya to talk through some of the detail of the project and to introduce our Cohort 1 partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So it's quite key to this project to know, before you embark on a process of application, to know what artists are expected to receive when participating. So 2020 will provide each artist with a fee of £10,000 and access to £15,000 for research, development and production of a work. Additional funds for access costs will be available, and that's on a case-by-case basis. So this is something to be discussed individually. The 2020 team, which is Susan, myself and Maya, will provide directorial, pastoral and project management and administrative support to the relationship between the artists and collections. The host collections, the representatives of which you will meet later in this session, will assign an institutional mentor. That sounds more foreboding than it actually is. You will have a key person in each collection who will work with the artist and identify key organizational contacts to support the artist. So as an artist, if you come into a collection for a 15-month residency in the context of 2020, you will have this key person with which to work, who will introduce you to the collection, to everybody within the staff structure, who will introduce you to the policies, to whatever it is that you're interested to explore while you're there. This person in each collection will introduce the artist to the organization's relevant key staff at all levels. That can be from front of house all the way to trustees, as and when relevant. And there will be regular check-ins with the artist to address any pastoral research or collections access needs.
And then I can come on to say a little bit about what artists will actually need to do once they're in residence. So there's the research and development aspect of this. So you'll have your initial physical site visit to meet the host collection and to meet us in person. There will be kind of a mix of physical and virtual engagement, I think, with most of these residencies, but we hope that everyone will be able to engage physically and meet the objects of the collection in person in some way. And that kind of engagement, virtual or physical or hybrid, will continue over the course of the R&D period. And you'll also be participating in regular virtual check-in meetings to update on your progress and ensure that we and the host collection are supporting you in all the ways that you need. And that's just, yeah, to make sure that that we can share in what you're doing and help you how we need to. And then, if it will let me move the slide, there's also the delivery of the artwork. Obviously, a major part of this programme is developing a new work for accession by the collection you're working with. It might be in any media or scale, and that will be agreed in conversation with the host collection and the 2020 director to make sure that whatever medium you're working in, that can be acquired successfully to the permanent collection. And you'll also be contributing an original digital print design to the 2020 print portfolio, which will then be gifted to all 20 of the partner collections for accession. So that is how your artwork would come to be represented in 20 collections. And of course, depending on what media you're working in, that digital print might look different, and that's something that we can work out as well. And we are also building a wider programme around these residencies, and we want the artists in residence to participate in that. And that will involve a few different things. We'll ask you to participate in an interview with a writer who's been commissioned to produce an original essay on your work. So each artist will have that interaction with a writer. We'll ask you to participate in the UAL, University of Arts London public programme, including the End of Project Symposium, and that is how we sort of share the work and outcomes of this project with a wider audience, and also participate in the host collections related public programming, and participate in a project evaluation interview with an independent arts consultant. So that will obviously come towards the end of the project. And that hopefully gives you a bit of a sense of what you will actually be doing in a 2020 residency. So without further ado, we're going to hand over to the partners now so they can introduce themselves and their collections, and you can get a sense of who and what exactly you would be working with. So we're going to start with Compton Verney. So Hannah, if you want to come on and say a few words before we dive into your presentation, that would be great.
Well, hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a contemporary arts producer here at Compton Verney, and Compton Verney's been open since 2011. No, it's 20 years now, isn't it? It's 20 years in 2024. So we have 6 collections here, 6 permanent collections, which include Naples, Northern European, British portrait, folk art, China, and we've just acquired some portrait miniatures as well. And we're very interested in an artist. I mean, you've got free rein to look at any of the collections, but the portrait miniatures, China, haven't had any previous kind of contemporary responses or interventions with them before. And folk art would be very interesting for us as well, because that's quite a unique collection, and it's the largest folk art collection in the country. So I'm happy to hand over to my video, and I just want to apologise in advance that I filmed it and I am terrible at filming.
Sir Peter Moores was a very generous benefactor. He wanted a gallery in the country for everyone to enjoy, all ages, and for visitors to come and be able to approach closely to a painting with no barriers and very few labels, so they could just enjoy the painting. After 5 years, he decided to step back in a very philanthropic gesture and hand it over to trustees who look after our wonderful collections, 4 of which he had the choice of picking the objects. The other 2, one was a gift and the other one he was asked to purchase.
However, we do acknowledge that the objects in this collection and how they were acquired was very much through a particular gaze. It was Sir Peter Moore, a wealthy, older, male white gentleman. It was his personal interests and his likes, his dislikes, and what he thought that audiences would want to see. And we're perfectly happy for you to challenge this in your response.
Hello, I'm Amy. I'm the Senior Curator at Compton Verney, and I'm standing here in our British Portraits collection. And this is an area where we'd be really excited to work with a contemporary artist to explore some of the works on display. We have portraits on the walls, large-scale images of people who've lived in Britain over the past 500 years, and we also have a significant collection of portrait miniatures, and that's an area that we would also really like to explore further with an artist. Some different interpretations and ways of looking at the paintings that we've explored most recently in this space are the pink label trails. So these are attached to some of the works, and these are the responses of a local Coventry-based group of young women called We Are Mayokwo. And many of them come from a refugee and migrant background, and they're really interested as an organisation in thinking about labels and how society kind of can label you. And we worked with them particularly on the representations of women in our collection and thought about how we might rewrite the labels of these works, how these girls who haven't necessarily got an art history background might bring their own fresh eyes and their own fresh responses to these representations of women. And we've got a really rich kind of theme of interpretation from that. Another thing that will be happening this summer is our collaboration with the National Portrait Gallery, and that's part of their Inspiring People project. They're lending us 10 works to show in this gallery, mainly photographic works, and they'll be shown beside works from our collection, again kind of in conversation with works from our collection, offering new perspectives on works in the collection, and many of the loans from the National Portrait Gallery picture people with local connections, so maybe from Coventry, Warwickshire or Birmingham, somewhere in their lifetime. So now we're upstairs in our folk art collection, and the character of this collection is quite different to other spaces in Compton Verney. This was actually put together by a man called Andrus Kalman, who was a passionate collector of folk art. And then it was bought en bloc as one collection by our founder, Sir Peter Moores, who didn't want to see it broken up and sold off as several different kind of objects. And the most recent interpretation that we've done in this collection is working with a specialist researcher who has been looking specifically at stories of disabled lives and what some of the objects might be able to tell us about how disabled people were working and things that they would have made, what their life would have been like in the past. And a really good example of that is this patchwork quilt behind me, which we think was made by recuperating soldiers during the Victorian period as a very kind of early form of occupational therapy.
Welcome to our Chinese bronze gallery. Sir Peter Moores was passionate about bronzes, After a visit to America with Arthur Sackler, he came back and sought the advice and expertise of specialists such as Dame Jessica Rawson and other legitimate collectors. He then had the vision of collecting specially for Compton Verney. Bronzes have a very specific reason for creation. They accompany a dead person to their ancestors, taking them as gifts. They offer basically food vessels, wine vessels, or water vessels.
One of the other things that's unique about our offer is that we would prefer an artist who is able to work to a hybrid model of both remote and on-site. And we're not saying that the entire creative process and residency needs to happen on-site. However, we are an extremely strong local community of volunteers and staff. Our site has a membership model, which means we have repeat regular visitors who are extremely invested in the site and its exhibitions and its objects. It was founded through philanthropy, and we still have a board of trustees that oversees the objects in the collections, and so it really is a family here. And what we want to encourage is for local communities, families, patrons, members, volunteers to have access to artists, to living artists, and to help inform the outcomes from the residency artist. That means that we can offer you space if you want to make here, or we can just be on hand for you to run research and development days. This can take any shape that you prefer, but we strongly advise that for our site it is best for you to be present in some form for some of your residency.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm the Fine Art Curator at the Harris Museum in Preston. Nicola, our Contemporary Art Curator, is also here today as well. So at the Harris, we're currently working on a major redevelopment project of the building and the displays. And at the moment, we're working on collections decant. So the building is emptying of its collections as I speak. But in the midst of the chaos, I opted to do a PowerPoint presentation to give you hopefully an overview of the history of the Harris, a bit of information about the collections and the redevelopment project and what we are offering for the 2020 project. So I won't say any more at this stage, but hopefully I've covered everything in the presentation. But of course, we'd be happy to take questions later on during the Q&A session. Thank you. Hi, I'm Lindsay, one of the curators at the Harris. The Harris is a Grade 1 listed neoclassical building located in the heart of Preston city centre. It was designed by James Hibbert, a local architect and alderman. The Harris first opened its doors to visitors in 1893, following a bequest from local lawyer Edmund Robert Harris, who left £300,000 to Preston in memory of his father, the Reverend Robert Harris. The main feature of the interior of the building is the impressive central hall, which rises through 4 stories to over 120 feet to the Lantern Tower. Hibbert's design included not only the fabric of the building but also the interior decoration, including mosaic floors, columns and copies of classical friezes. A slightly later addition is the Egyptian balcony in the Lantern Tower, a series of oil paintings depicting key sites in Egypt and murals based on Egyptian tombs, all painted by John Summerscales in 1911. Today, the Harris holds some 115,000 items, including art, history, ceramics and glass, costume and textiles, and rare books. Visitor favourites include the painting Pauline in the Yellow Dress by Sir James Gunn, and a collection of over 2,700 scent bottles. Highlights in the art collection include 18th century paintings by Preston's Davies family, works on paper including watercolours by Turner and drawings by Angelica Kaufman, Victorian paintings including John Frederick Lewis's In the Bayes Garden, 20th century works by Laura Knight and Stanley Spencer, contemporary works including Lucian Freud, Bridget Riley and Lebaina Himid, and digital works including Lucy Gunning and Shazad Darwood. In March 2021, the Harris was granted £4.5 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, a critical piece of funding to deliver an ambitious £10 million project to restore and reimagine the Harris as a 21st century community and cultural hub. In January this year, 2 further grants were received from Garfield Weston Foundation and the Wolfson Foundation. These grants are supporting additional works to the second floor galleries, helping to realise our full ambitions for the Harris Your Place project. The building closed last October and the new Harris will reopen in spring 2024. While we're closed, a busy programme of activity including satellite displays, online content, a loans programme, community projects and artist commissions are keeping us connected with our audiences. This includes working with creatives and local communities to further develop what the new Harris will look like, embedding community empowerment and co-production in our ways of working. The new Harris will blend collection displays and library services across the building. It will feature new spaces including a community gallery, creative learning studio, young people's space, a special collections gallery that will allow better access to stored collections, plus a new cafe and retail space. Displays will tell stories of the Harris, Preston and the world across 3 floors, incorporating changing displays co-curated with local communities, creating experiences and journeys of discovery across the building that are diverse, rich and inclusive. The second floor balcony will showcase the collections alongside newly commissioned works, providing opportunities to pose questions and encourage conversation. Within the overarching narrative, global stories told with a local accent, displays will consider globalisation, empire and colonialism, the Harris's architecture and world influences behind its design, artists and makers, past and present who have been influenced by world travel and ancient cultures. We are thrilled to be part of the 2020 project, to have the opportunity to work with an artist and commission a work that will feature in our new displays when we reopen in 2024. We want to work with an artist who will help shape a community-led display on our second floor balcony, making a new work that will be key in reinterpreting objects in the collection, telling stories from a fresh perspective. We hope to work with an artist both virtually and in our temporary spaces around the city, and to support access to most of the collections while they are in storage. Our curators and the wider team look forward to working on this project and supporting change at an exciting time in the Harris's history.
Great, and now we've got Hepworth Wakefield, if you want to come on and say a few words.
Hello, my name is Eleanor Clayton. I'm Senior Curator at the Hepworth Wakefield. I was actually wondering if you could play the film first and then I'll say a few words after so I don't end up duplicating myself.
Absolutely, will do.
My name is Eleanor Clayton and I'm Senior Curator at the Hepworth Wakefield and I'll be working with the artists in residence for the 2020 programme. The Hepworth Wakefield opened in 2011, designed by David Chipperfield Architects. And the building sits on the edge of the River Calder, as you see here, containing 10 beautiful gallery spaces with plenty of natural light, a cafe, shop, archive and collection stores. At the Hepworth Wakefield, we're the custodians of the Wakefield Permanent Art Collection, which was established in 1923. Its former home was Wakefield Art Gallery, which opened in 1934, and the first director, Ernest Musgrave, set the direction of the collection, stating that its aim was to keep in touch with modern art as it relates to modern life. The collection was built throughout the 20th century, with strong holdings of British modernism and works across disciplines including drawings, paintings, prints, photography, sculpture and ceramics. We have particularly strong holdings of work by Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, artists who grew up nearby and who Wakefield Art Gallery supported with acquisitions and exhibitions throughout their careers. And at the heart of the Hepworth Wakefield are 2 spaces dedicated to Hepworth, our namesake, who was born in Wakefield, which focus on her work and artistic process. The collection has continued to grow into the present moment, and we aim to create a dialogue between modern and contemporary art. So, for example, here you see Henry Moore's two-piece reclining figure alongside new acquisitions by Mona Hatoum, Phila de Barlow and Alvaro Barrington. And here we have Hepworth in the middle alongside Ben Nicholson and Jade Farajatimi. We've also continued to grow our holdings of British modernism, most recently becoming the permanent home for the Sherwin family collection, a major collection of British surrealism. And we continue to support contemporary artists at all stages of their careers, including to create ambitious new commissions for the collection. For example, this current show by Emi Arai, co-commissioned with Innova's Future Collect programme. In 2019, the Hepworth Gallery Garden was opened, a new free public garden with a changing programme of sculpture, which also includes works drawn from our collection.
Great, thank you, Mi. That's brilliant. And so just to say a bit more to that, there are 5,500 works in the collection. Of those, 1,200 of them are topographical landscape images that were part of the Gott collection, which was gifted to Wakefield in 1930. But we also, as you saw there, have strong holdings of British modernism and works across different media, including ceramics, and acquired and made through the 20th century with the aim to keep in touch with modern life, or to cultivate an understanding of contemporary art as it relates to modern life. So the collection is largely on site, and we would be happy to welcome an artist who look at the collection both remotely through our database, but also to work with the collection in the stores. And we're interested in supporting artists in their careers to be ambitious. And the sort of strands in the collection are, I suppose, legacies of modernism, particularly process and sculptural practice, landscape, materials, and of course, as I mentioned, this contemporary art as it relates to modern life. Thank you.
We'll hand over to Kelvingrove and the lovely Miles.
Thank you, Maya. Hi everyone, I'm Miles. I'm the curator of the Legacies of Slavery and Empire at Glasgow Museums. For those who don't know, Glasgow Museums is quite a large museum service that manages several buildings and a collection of over 1 million objects on behalf of Glasgow City Council. That collection's pretty wide-ranging, has developed over a long period of time, includes natural history, Scottish history, what is still termed world cultures, and more contemporary art as well. My work is particularly focused on Kelvingrove, which is Glasgow Museums' flagship museum. It attracts over 1 million visitors a year, and it's the largest of our venues as well. And I'm interested in that building because of its deep connections to British colonialism, and it's a space where the way that we present those narratives could be much improved. But I won't say too much about that because I'm happy to share the video and then answer any questions later on.
Kelvingrove Art Gallery and Museum. One of Glasgow's top visitor attractions, the flagship venue of Glasgow Museums, loved by many, and it is ultimately a museum of empire. The city of Glasgow grew significantly from its involvement in transatlantic slavery and British colonialism, and the development of some of its most prominent museums is also deeply rooted in those histories. Before the current building imposed itself on the west end of Glasgow, the house of Lord Provost Patrick Colquhoun stood nearby. Patrick Colquhoun was a sugar and tobacco merchant, meaning his wealth derived from the exploitation of enslaved people and the products they produced. Patrick Colquhoun's house became Glasgow's first municipal museum in the 19th century. As the collection grew, so did the need for a grander museum, more worthy of Glasgow's status as the second city of empire. An international exhibition was held that celebrated Glasgow's industries and their involvement in the empire. The money raised was used to construct a new building, which is what stands in Kelvingrove Park today. Within its walls, you can find natural history collections, art, scientific objects, and much more. Its spaces are vast and packed with displays and often people. However, colonial and racial violence is hiding in plain sight. There are artworks donated by people who traded in human beings amidst portraits of merchants, enslavers, and plantation owners, with no mention of the source of their wealth, their reputation undisturbed by the truth. Colonization, if it is mentioned at all, is to be celebrated. After all, it was the foundation of Glasgow's famous shipping industry and the system that enabled Scots to travel all over the world. Walking around the museum, you might or you might not notice that displays are overwhelmingly white. Art depicting Black, Asian and Indigenous people by Black, Asian and Indigenous people is scarce, often marginalised, othered or relegated to being colonial curiosities, frozen in display cases, with the violence behind their acquisition obscured by language such as souvenirs of war, and much of their cultural context lost in this strange place.
So Kelvingrove is obviously a very problematic space that needs a lot of change across the museum. And part of my work is having those conversations with staff and with visitors about what those changes could look like and then moving forward to make them. And I very much see the 2020 project being part of this, working with an artist in residence to explore some of the issues in this space, some of the themes that are cropping up across the collection, and being a way of creatively responding to that process.
If Peter from Lightbox would like to say a few words.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Peter Hall. I'm Head of Exhibitions at the Lightbox. Welcome. And our collection, which you'll see in the video, really centres around a social history connection, collection connected to Woking and the last 150 years really of Woking's past. Why don't we go straight into the video, Maya?
The Lightbox hopes that the 2020 project invigorates the historic collection with new research and interpretation that brings out the collections and history of Woking in a new and diverse way. A 2020 residency would be a unique opportunity for an artist and the Lightbox to address the ways in which audiences see or don't see themselves reflected in our collections. There is a rich and eclectic mix when it comes to the Woking history, and the collections in our care reflect this history. Mainly a social history collection, the objects within the collection reflect the stories behind the communities, businesses, organisations and iconic buildings that used to be and are in Woking. The collection is predominantly made up of objects from the 19th and 20th centuries. There is a growing collection of archaeological material from Woking Palace, which dates from the 14th and 15th centuries. The historic collection consists of around 4,000 objects, ranging from large architectural or functional objects to small domestic items and archives.
The historic collection falls under the care of the charity, Woking Museum and Arts and Crafts Centre. The charity set up a trust entitled the Galleries Collections Trust, which has various strategic objectives, but its first is to strengthen a sense of pride, place and identity in Woking. We're an accredited museum with the appropriate and relevant levels of documentation and infrastructure associated with the collection. Woking Museum and Arts and Crafts Centre was inaugurated in the early 1990s and started collecting material in advance of a museum site being chosen. Collecting began in earnest by individuals, organisations, clubs, societies and local history experts came on side and donated objects under a collecting policy that focused the activities. These stories and the people within them were used to develop the permanent museum at the Lightbox called Woking Story. The Lightbox Gallery Museum with Woking Story within it opened in 2007, the culmination of nearly 25 years of work seeking a permanent site.
The collections are displayed in the permanent Woking Stories Museum, which were designed by Real Studios in 2007, using content from the organisation developed by staff and volunteers who formed the Story Group. The Story Group researched the objects, people, stories and archives to create narratives unearthing the history of Woking past. Important as many of the hidden histories and stories for Woking residents and people in this area were not widely known at all. 21st and 20th century aspects of Woking's life are reflected through the collections and displays that focus on Woking's icons, such as McLaren, Woking Football Club, Paul Weller, H.G. Wells's book War of the Worlds, and Kazuo Ishiguro. Following the arrival of the railway, important businesses, industries and agriculture came to Woking and are represented in the collections, such as Kenwood, James Walker and nurseries.
There are various 19th century collections that are of national significance, such as the Brookwood Hospital collection. Brookwood Hospital, originally known as Brookwood Asylum, opened in 1867. It was run as a self-contained community, rather like an enclosed village. It closed in 1994 when care in the community had become the main approach to caring for people living with mental health problems. The collection reflects the work of Dr. Brushfield, the first superintendent of Brookwood Asylum, who collected examples of early and rudimentary mental health treatments for instructive purposes so that he could train his staff correctly in new and modern techniques. Although conditions may have been very challenging for patients and staff alike, Dr. Brushfield banned the use of mechanical restraints and fostered a strong community ethos to treat the patients and provide a safe space. Another significant collection focuses on the Shah Jahan Mosque, the Oriental Institute and the Muslim Burial Ground, now the Peace Gardens. The Shah Jahan, the first purpose-built mosque in the UK, was erected in 1889 and was designed by W.L. Chambers. Chambers based his design on the Art Arab, a rare book lent by the India Office, and also used details from other mosques. The idea for the mosque came from Dr. Gottlieb Leitner, a scholar who spoke many languages. In 1881, he bought what had been the Royal Dramatic College in Woking, and he used it to house his new Institute of Oriental Learning and Literature. He then had the Shah Jahan Mosque built next door in 1889. It was mainly paid for by Begum Shah Jahan, the ruler of Bhopal state in India. Dr. Leitner planned to add a Hindu temple, a church and a synagogue on the site, but he died before they could be built. The mosque has played a part in attracting a large Muslim community to Woking. A number of buildings close by have been restored. These are used as extra prayer halls and for education and sports purposes.
A site and collection of national significance in Woking is Brookwood Cemetery. In 1852, the London Necropolis and National Mausoleum Company was set up to buy 1,500 acres of common land and built a cemetery intended to hold all of London's dead. It is still the largest cemetery in Britain with over 235,000 graves. There are two main sections in the cemetery, Anglican and Nonconformist. Following the building of the Shah Jahan Mosque, the Muslim cemetery was opened in 1890, the first such ground in the country. There are also areas for Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, Zoroastrians, and guilds such as Odd Fellows Society and others. The collection associated with Woking Palace contains archaeological finds from various digs at the site and reflects the activities and occupation of those who frequented the Tudor Manor House. Lady Margaret Beaufort, Henry VII and Henry VIII were the main royal protagonists associated with the site in the 15th and early 16th centuries.
The Woking Story Museum and the Historic Collection are used by schools, families and visitors to the Lightbox. Local residents visit the museum to learn about the hidden history of Woking, and people moving into the area visit to learn about their new town. A team of expert and enthusiastic volunteers work with the learning and collections teams to research, navigate and bring new objects out for display on a regular basis. As well as a store, which contains the bulk of the collection, there is a research room which contains the archive relating to the historic collection and a large collection of oral history interviews of hundreds of residents of the borough from all backgrounds. These recordings are stored as part of the collection, are displayed in Woking Story and were published in a book called Woking Living Words. There are many more stories to tell.
Great, and we'll hand over now to Alex.
Hi there, can you see me?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't have a lovely presentation like the ones we've seen before. Nor do we have a fantastic building. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about Ndaka. Ndaka is a a collection that came out of an HLF project run by Shape Arts, started in 2014, and stands for the National Disability Arts Collection and Archive. Originally, the idea of a disabled sculptor called Tony Heaton, who was then in 2003 or 4 running a retreat for disabled artists called Holton Lee down in Bournemouth. And now it's a primarily digital collection with a physical venue at the University of Buckinghamshire in the library there. We also have a secure store. The primary elements of the collection are digital, and it encompasses the work of disabled artists from 1980 to the present, with a focus on the 1990s, because most of the artwork we hold is a commentary on, was intended as a commentary on disability rights activism and campaigns by various groups. We do hold a wide collection of art, but also a huge collection of ephemera to do with that artwork, and also to do with the campaigns that artwork was commenting on. All falls in the category of disability arts created by or commenting on disability by disabled practitioners and their allies. It's a digital and physical collection, radical responses to discrimination. But one of the interesting things about the collection, and one of the reasons why I'm interested in participating in this project, is that because it was created in the 1980s and 90s as a response to the campaign issues that disabled artists and activists faced at the time, there's very much focus on physical disability, no mention of neurodiversity, and for want of a better term, most of the artists are very white and male. So in terms of, it's a collection that's already partially aimed to decolonize the art world and needs decolonizing itself. What we'd be able to offer an artist in residence would be a huge collection, 3,500 to 4,500 of catalogued artworks and records, and also what's loosely described as a research collection of artwork and ephemera that is yet to be catalogued or properly explored, including the records and archives of one Audrey Barker, who's a practicing artist. She finished her career in multi-sensory multimedia art. Her first exhibition, for example, was at the ICA, which she refused to take up because the venue wasn't accessible. But she created in the 1970s the first disability arts hub, art school for disabled artists. So there are new stories to be told. There's new groups of disabled peoples and intersectionalities that need exploring, and a huge weight of material that can be researched and to tell the story of disability art that's almost yet to be discovered, because we simply didn't have the projects proved to be considerably larger than we expected it to be. Many of the artists involved are still whose works we hold are still practicing, and it crosses all genres, from sculpture, multimedia, lots of early take-up digital artwork created on computers in the 1980s and the early 90s, as well as traditional portraiture and craftwork and handmade items. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop. My voice is giving out, but I'm happy to answer more questions about the collection.
Thanks.
When we get to Q&A, I do apologise.
Thanks so much for that, Alex. We'll hand over to Miriam, Pallant House now.
Hi everyone, so my name's Miriam O'Connor-Perks. I'm an assistant curator at Pallant House Gallery in Chichester, West Sussex. Our video is just a little bit about the background of our collections and the history of the house, and yeah, I'm very happy to answer questions at the end. Thanks, Maya.
Hello everyone, my name is Miriam O'Connor-Perks. I'm an assistant curator at Pallant House Gallery in Chichester, West Sussex. I'm really excited to be working on the 2020 project and looking forward to working with artists, other collections and UAL to both create new work and critically engage with our collections. This is a brief introduction to the history of the gallery and collections, along with our aims for the future, to provide you with a little more information for your proposals. Pallant House Gallery has one of the most significant public collections of 20th century British art in the UK, encompassing paintings, drawings, prints, photography, sculpture, ceramics and textiles. Our mission is to share and stimulate new thinking on British art and to play a pivotal role in the creative lives of the widest possible audience. We aim to care for and interpret the collections and make them more available for study and creative inspiration. Pallant House Gallery first opened as a public gallery of modern art in 1982, when the then Dean of Chichester Cathedral, Walter Hussey, offered his collection of modern British art to the city of Chichester on the condition that it would be displayed in the domestic setting of Pallant House. During his lifetime, Walter Hussey was a major supporter of contemporary artists, commissioning new work for Chichester Cathedral, including a tapestry by John Piper and a stained glass window by Marc Chagall. The original Pallant House is considered to be one of the most significant examples of 18th century townhouses in England. The site for the new house was the Pallants, at that time an industrial quarter of Chichester, dominated by leather workers and brewers. It was built in around 1712 for Henry Lisbon Peckham and Elizabeth Bowbury. The original idea to build a grand house in Chichester seems to have been Elizabeth's, and she appears to have taken a close interest in the house's design and construction. Henry Lisbon Peckham was most likely a wine merchant and had significant dealings with the East India Company, utilising the large inheritance his wife had gained following her brother's death. Unfortunately, there is little record on the precise nature of his associations with the company, but this provides scope for new research. In 1989, the Keeley bequest came to Pallant House Gallery through Art Fund, complementing the founding collection from Walter Hussey. The Keeley bequest also broadened the gallery's international scope, with important examples of modern art by artists such as André Derain, Paul Cézanne, Paul Klee, Gino Severini and John Metzinger. Here are some further examples from the Keeley bequest shown in the house. The Wilson gift is comprised of the collection of Colin St. John Wilson, a famous British architect who designed the British Library. Wilson formed a number of friendships with artists such as Peter Blake, Prunella Clough, Richard Hamilton and Edoardo Paolozzi through the Institute of Contemporary Art in the 1950s. The Wilson gift contains a number of icons of British pop art, including Peter Blake, Patrick Caulfield, Joe Tilson and Jan Howarth. The George and Anne Dannett gift came to the gallery in 2011, including major works by artists associated with post-war abstract art, including William Gere. George Dannett was also an abstract artist. He became friends with Patrick Heron, who introduced him to the circle of artists around St Ives, including Wilhelmina Barnes-Graham, Terry Frost, Roger Hilton, Peter Lanyon and Ben Nicholson, whose works now form part of the gallery's collection. Since 2001, former teachers Mark Golder and Brian Thompson have worked closely with the gallery's directors and curators to create a collection of prints by providing an annual purchasing fund, supplemented with further gifts from their own collection. Featuring a diverse range of printmaking techniques and showcasing the print's potential as a democratic medium, the gift includes works by artists such as Paul Arago, Tasta Dean, Anish Kapoor and Chris Ofili. All works offered to the gallery by private collectors, whether small collections or individual works, are done with a wish to share their artworks with future generations. The gallery will continue to work to increase the diversity of our collection, focusing on identity, race and representation, and finding new opportunities to amplify the voices and creativity of underrepresented artists and address omissions in art, holdings to enable new and critical reinterpretations of our collection and ensure that we can present a narrative of British art from a contemporary perspective that is representative of the wider community. Here are some links to find out a little bit more about the gallery. Good luck with your proposals, and we look forward to seeing and working with you in the future.
And if we could hand over to Sheffield now and Sian.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Shan and I'm Head of Collections at Sheffield Museums. And for us, this project is a unique opportunity to both gain fresh perspectives and also to fantastically develop our collection. Sheffield collections are typical of civic museums in that they're very wide and diverse in one way, but also steeped in colonialism in another. We would welcome an artist who would like to respond to any area of these collections. This might be an area that they've already identified in the proposal stage, or that they come to Sheffield, meet the team, look at the collections, and then choose an area to work with. My presentation will run briefly through some of the history of the museums and the collections. Thank you.
Sheffield Museums Trust is an independent charity that operates 6 of the city's leading museums and heritage sites and cares for the city's collections. We work with our communities to tell the story of Sheffield and its people and celebrate its reputation for excellence in craft, making and innovation. Our sites include Abbeydale Industrial Hamlet, a unique 18th century industrial works which originally made agricultural tools. Shepherd Wheel, a historic water wheel and grinding workshop. Graves Gallery, often described as a hidden gem on the top floor of the Art Deco Library building, home to Sheffield's visual art collection and a programme of temporary exhibitions. Millennium Gallery, a key cultural landmark within the city, which shows high-profile changing exhibitions alongside displays from the metalwork and Ruskin collections. Weston Park Museum and Kelham Island Museum together celebrate Sheffield's industrial, social and natural history, exploring the growth of the city and its people. We also have a large collection store where many of the objects are housed, and we welcome any artist who wants to work with us to explore the store and meet the team. Across all our sites, we work collaboratively with individuals, organisations and communities, and seek to develop and diversify our audiences and collections. Sheffield Museums cares for the city's collection on behalf of the local authority, manage the Guild of St George Ruskin collection, and are home to the Ken Hawley Tool collection, as well as running one of the oldest weather stations in the country. Sheffield's collections include over 1 million objects, including archaeology, art, industrial history, metalwork, natural science, social history and world cultures. Our aspiration is that the collections represent, celebrate and inspire the people of Sheffield. Sheffield collections were originally formed in the late 1700s, with many items being given to the city through the Literary and Philosophical Society, which was set up in 1822. These collections subsequently formed the basis for the City Museum in 1875, with the mapping bequest providing the foundations for the city's art collection, later augmented by J.G. Graves' generous gifts. The collections have grown substantially over the last 140 years through bequests, donations, depositions and purchases. Recent acquisitions include objects as varied as the first vial of COVID-19 vaccine used in Sheffield, a pilot whale skeleton, a significant group of works by Mark Wallinger, a collection of multi-bladed knives, and Maroon Mercer's Duet for Duo, Solar Symphony 7. At the heart of our collections is Sheffield's metalwork, which is designated for its outstanding national and historical significance. It was amassed as a reference collection, showcasing examples of excellent design and high-quality craftsmanship from around the world to inspire the city's manufacturers, designers and makers, and continues that role today. Sheffield's collection of visual art comprises predominantly British and European art, ranging from the 16th century to the present day, and includes paintings, sculpture, film, photography, and works on paper. The most significant grouping is the Modern British collection, which has its foundations in the original collection of J.G. Graves. Over the past 10 years, we've also revisited our strong holding of works by members of the Black Art Group and developed our contemporary collections on the theme of identity. We work with artists in many different ways. For example, we collaborated with Czech artist Katarina Schrader on the Contemporary Art Society Commission to Collect Award, which manifests itself in a large-scale installation of over 500 drawings created by participants from all over the Czech Republic. We work with artists Tim Etchells and Vladka Horvat to explore and reimagine the city's historic museum collections alongside new work by the artists. More recently, we worked with Keith Piper, who interrogated the collection to create a powerful exploration of alternative and outsider perspectives on traditional histories. The display was led by Piper's own significant work, The Seven Rages of Man, which has been on long-term loan to Sheffield for over 20 years. We are currently working on a 5-year project to redisplay the visual art collection at the Graves Gallery, funded by the Ampersand Foundation. This has supported 2 major redisplays so far and will enable young people and communities to curate the collection in new ways. We hope that the 2020 Commission, in whatever form it takes, will be showcased as part of this ongoing creative programme at the Graves Gallery.
Thank you to all the collection partners who gave introductions. We had lovely presentations through the break. And now in order to stay to our timeline, really, we need to keep straight up with the next steps. I will keep that very brief so we can get on to questions. We will pop a link in the chat because there's quite a bit going on in chat about specific questions as to the next cohort calls and things like that, and this is all linked up, as well as the link to the recording, which will be made available next week, so that will be shared quite quickly. I suggest you do take a break if you need it, as this has been a lovely hour of dense information. I will go briefly over the next steps with you, and then we will move straight on to questions. Don't worry if you pop the question in the chat and it is not answered directly today. We will comb through the chat, extract questions, and funnel that on to collection partners to be answered. So don't worry, your questions will be answered and will be integrated as part of the FAQ. Maya, if you don't mind putting the next step slide on. Lovely. So it looks like a lot of bullet points, but it's a fairly straightforward process, which is on the Decolonizing Arts website. It's a form, and what you need to submit in order to have an expression of interest put through for 2020 is the following information, either in writing or in video format. You are offered the option through the form. So a summary of your practice, quite brief, a statement of your interest in the 2020 project. So your interest in 1 or 2 of the collections that you heard about today. And very interestingly for us and hopefully for you, how you expect the 2020 project to impact on your practice. So what does it mean for you and your practice to potentially participate in this project? An outline proposal relating to 1 or 2 specific collections that you heard about today. An outline budget detailing any items or anticipated expenditure over £500. Just to be clear, the proposal and the budget are draft, so we do not expect you to then work exactly to that. It is to give us a sense of how you feel you would respond to the context of the collection and the residency. And a CV and portfolio of your previous work, such as visual, audio, or video material. So that can be up to 10 images in PNG or JPEG, or a single PDF document with up to 5 pages with titles, dimensions, year of making, and materials. For audio and video, please provide us with links to your own website or a platform on which your material is uploaded. This is all fairly straightforward, and there is a lot more detail in the PDF of the call for artists, which is again on the Decolonizing Arts Institute's 2020 page project. Maya, if you can please cycle on, lovely. So key dates, the deadline for application is the 6th of June at midday. So if you are interested in the project, this might just be how you spend the next bank holiday. You are welcome to contact us anytime between now and then if you have any questions. And the week starting the 13th of June, we will be notifying applicants who are shortlisted to interview. We are expressing a preference for interviews to happen in person. So we will be inviting you to come and meet with the selection panel in London. There is a fee to cover the preparation associated with that. Then interviews will be taking place the week of the 20th of June. So the 20th, 21st and 22nd, we will be interviewing shortlisted applicants. If there are any reasons why you can't physically attend the interview, do let us know and we'll see what we can do to arrange something remotely. So if your proposal is selected and you are successful through the interview process, then you will be informed of the outcome by the end of June. So that last week of June will be when you will receive a call from us. And there will be a lot of admin going on in the meantime between the end of June and September, when residencies will begin. So a lot of paperwork to put in place. We will put you in touch with the comms team. We will be asking for images, all the usual questions and requirements to be announcing that you are part of the 2020 project. We cannot give, unfortunately, feedback at the first stage of selection, but anybody who is shortlisted for interview and who attends an interview will be provided with detailed feedback on their process. Maya, Susan, is there anything that I left out about steps that you would like to jump in about?
I think you've covered everything there, Martine. I'm sure that artists, potential applicants, still have lots of questions, and maybe rather than, or in addition to firing all these links and all this talking at you, we'd very much welcome your questions to us, the team, or to any of the partners. We could, if people want to jump in by putting their hands up, we can do that. Alternatively, we will also be combing the chat and picking out questions that seem to be particularly resonant among those present.